Welcome to the Private Lender Podcast with your hosts from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hello. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Private Lenders Podcast. Chris and Jason here. Thanks for checking out the show. As always, our podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com. If you haven't done so already, go check it out, create a free account, join the conversation, use the training materials, and we'll see you inside there. We spend a lot of time inside the mastermind ourselves. Okay, topic for today. We're talking about the concept of doing the boring work consistently. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So as entrepreneurs, as investors, real estate people, in business in general, there are a lot of shiny objects out there that could get you distracted. We've all fallen victim to this. We're better now than we used to be, for sure. But over the years, there's been all kinds of stuff that pops up, like outside of our core lending business, like, buying rental properties, or let's launch another website, or let's write another book. And there's certain value to some of that stuff. But the question always is, instead of getting distracted by the sexy and shiny object type stuff, would I be better served to just head down, focus on the boring work? And we're going to talk about what we mean by the boring work in lending.
Yeah. And also related to kind of head down, do the boring work, stick to the plan. A lot of that can be interrupted because folks inside their hard money lending company get distracted and jump into potentially deals that might not make the most sense. Maybe they're bigger deals than you're ready for, or there's deals outside your market that you might not be, your discipline's not fully there. You might entertain because you have small pipeline syndrome. I think the point of all of this is, you stick to the basics, do your block and tackle. Chris and I were talking about this earlier today. Like, we've never really hit a home run inside our lending business. But what we have hit is singles and doubles every day for 15 years. And that's, accomplished some very, very big things inside our business by staying focused and being, stuck on the prize of like, this is the widget that we do. These are the types of deals that fit our mold. And we're very disciplined to stay away from other things. Not that we haven't done other types of projects over the years. But I'll tell you, for the first 5 years of business, we had, a very, very simplified fix and flip, or, fix and then potentially rent, or, bridge loan on a investment residential property. Like, everything was the same. It fit very, very simply. And, if you're starting out, that's important, right? Because you need to master that. And you also have, and more importantly, you have to have a lot of consistency with your capital investors. If you're raising capital, you don't want to have different types of products and different types of things. You want to keep things simple.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that in the first 5 years of HMB's history, we were laser focused. Like, it was plan A was plan A, and there wasn't any plan B, which is why our company took off like it did. Like that was very important for us to do that at that time. It was like the next 5 years after that where we got some of the shiny object syndrome, and we were chasing around other stuff and wanted to do everything under the sun. And backing up a little bit, so in our size business, we're about 10 people total, including partners and staff. And in our size operation, 45 million outstanding, 200 loans, whatever, we're owner operators. We operate this business every day. We underwrite deals. We handle our capital. We service our loans. We manage defaults, our team. We're not the kind of thing where we're going to design this business and put all the right people in place and totally remove ourselves. Is that a nice idea? Yes. Is it realistic for us to do this as safe as we want to do it and also as profitably? Not really. And that's okay. That's something that we've accepted in our business. So the boring work for us is, if you look at one of our weeks, I bet they look pretty damn similar to all the other weeks. So, and Jason can go through some of his boring work, but my boring work that we're very, very consistent about is I put money into our deals, right? put the capital into the deals. Got to do that every day. I have communication with our capital investors frequently, either about deals or about, just stuff in general, business in general. We're not actively raising capital right now. We haven't done so in a long time. So I'm not like on new investor calls a lot. That's not really part of our operation right now, 15 years in. I manage defaults. Like if things get, anything but perfect performance, we have to step in and manage it, possibly send to lawyers, all the normal kind of loan management stuff. I manage our staff. I keep an eye on processes, and I do marketing stuff. I do email broadcasts. We do podcasts. I'm managing our paid traffic campaigns. And that's what a lot of my weeks look like, and in and out. And I have a good split between like the transactional work and like the business growth work and management, that kind of stuff. And then the weeks end up looking pretty damn similar, right? Because I'm in here every day. We've been doing it for 15 years. We know that this is the case. And we have done all of these reps so many times for so many years that we're way beyond that 10,000 hour mark that makes you an expert, way beyond that, right? And so that's why, and something I heard recently on a podcast that really applies to this is, before you can make something bigger, you have to make it better. There's no point in growing any kind of business if your widget, your process, your service is not totally dialed in, because you don't want to try to scale a C-class product. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I mean, keep in mind, the basics are easy. The basics are easy of this business. All things considered, anybody can get good at the basics. The hard part is the discipline to stay focused on doing the basics over and over and over and over and over and over and over of what works. I feel like it was easy for us early on because, if you ever heard our story of the first deal that we ever did that happened to be out of state, coincidentally, and we don't lend out of state, we typically only lend locally. But at that time, we were molding our business model. We didn't really know what we were doing or how we were doing it. Back then, we were finding capital investors and kind of brokering deals to them, not controlling the capital like we do now. So the model obviously morphed into what it is today and what's way better. But you didn't know that on day one, right? Like we took our first deal we ever did, we made $7,500 on, and we took that check and then we started our business entity and deposited in that new account, and that was our working capital. And point being is like, wow, that worked. That was pretty easy. Let's do it again. And it was basic. And, did you learn? It took us, several years before we had any defaults. So we didn't know anything about defaults until we did. And then we learned that. But it's sticking to the basics and kind of doing that every day. And I think that the basics are boring for people. Sometimes they're not sexy, but that's really what helps get to the next level, right? Like, it's kind of rinse and repeat the process over and over and over. And that doesn't mean that you can't put systems and people and processes in place to help automate some of that stuff. And then you work on the higher level stuff. Nobody's saying that you should be doing keystrokes and things like that, but the operations should still be the basics and the boring, and whatever holes you have inside the business, you work on. It's like, you know what? We need to refine this process. We need to refine this marketing strategy. We need to refine this servicing software. We need to refine our scripting on the front end, whatever that case is, right? That's stuff you're focused on. I mean, what Chris said related to what an average day or average work does is typically we're both like 51% proactive, 49% reactive. I should say 51% offense, 49% defense. And what I mean by that is transactional work is not like, that's not offense. That's not helping your business grow. Even if you do a deal today and you close a deal and you make $10,000, like that's great. But that was from offense that you ran days ago, weeks ago, months ago, years ago to get that deal into the door, right? And that's an important thing. So like, my days are typically broken up in thirds. So like transactional is typically a third, playing offense and growth is typically a third, and then kind of operational stuff is typically a third for the most part. So like no matter what happens, in order to win the day, you got to do something growth oriented or proactive or something. It can be as little as like making a sales call to sending an email campaign, doing a content video, going to a meetup group, speaking at a seminar, whatever the case is, whatever it is, in order to potentially grow the operation through finding deals, finding capital, working with and training staff, training referral partners, creating business, whatever that is, right? Like that's one thing that I think a lot of folks forget, because so many lenders that I know, and things are changing. They've changed over the last 2 months. I think a lot of folks, they get in this business, they start doing deals, they start deploying capital, they get repeat business. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like, all right, well, I've got some deals coming in. That's my full-time job. It's just work through these deals. And, that's okay. And that's important. And you need to be working through deals. But at the same time, you need to be marketing and doing proactive stuff on a regular basis, so that well never dries up.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be consistent. Like that blend of your transactional work and your business growth work has to happen always, every day, every week, right? And you're right. A lot of people, like, they'll get tied up with a transaction to the point that they'll work on one deal all day long, and then it's the only thing they do. And that's a mistake. I mean, that's a way to keep everything exactly the same, if that's, what happens. And I also want to talk about doing the boring work related to raising capital real quick, because I see a lot in the mastermind group where people are asking about how you guys are raising capital. Like what is your capital raising strategy, as if there is a magic one that if you don't know it, you're not going to get any capital. And it's not the case. Now, do we have a process for how we present and close and follow up with capital investors? Absolutely. That's a part of the training courses in the mastermind group as well. But you also have to do the boring work related to locating people with investable capital and having conversations with them. How are you guys raising capital? As a question in there is, that's pretty easy. Have a lot of conversations with capital investors, right? Like, that's got to happen at some point. And if people are like, well, yeah, I spoke to a couple people, they didn't do it to any of my deals. A couple people ain't going to do it. Like, get to 100. Like, that's when we started HMB, that's what I did half of every day. And granted, I don't have to do it now so much, because I did the boring work of that back then, but it was every single day. I was looking at that spreadsheet of contacts that I had that could be either potential investors or people that could refer me to potential investors, and have calls and meetings every day. And so, like, whatever your goal is, maybe it's, I don't know, 2 new investor conversations a week. And now I know people have the limiting belief of, oh, well, I don't know 100 investors. Okay, maybe not. Maybe I don't either. But out of the people I know in my first degree network, the people that they all know is way more than you'll ever need. Guaranteed. I've seen it happen over and over again with us, with other lenders, with developers, real estate developers we're friends with. Same thing. First degree network, second degree network. You make the spreadsheet, you work it every day, you have those calls or Zooms or present with your pitch deck, and then you follow up in the proper method, and it'll happen by doing the boring work, not the magic strategy that you must access like it's the freaking the promised land in Atlas Shrugged, right? Like, it's not that. It's doing the boring work of talking to capital investors every day.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, that's the business in general. Like we talked about, like, it's, everyone thinks this is the sexy business. All I have to do is deploy capital, my own or somebody else's. And that's true. It is that, but like, you gotta do the boring work of contacting, working deal flow, right? Working leads, working borrowers. You think it's fun to like talk to, 9 phone calls in a row and they're not all qualified to work with. It's just like, oh, I just want to work with these particular ones, or I only want to work by referral and things like that. I mean, listen, you can mold this type of business. You can mold any way you want, right? If you have a few $100,000 liquid and you want to deploy it yourself responsibly, do it. You want to create $100 million fund and deploy it in multiple markets, you can do that as well. And there's no right or wrong. The point is, if you're trying to grow this and scale this the right way, and the right way to me is the same for everybody, right? Because even if you only have $1 million to deploy and that's your entire goal to do that, and you're just like, well, I don't need that many borrowers, I don't need to build out this system, I don't need to do that. Well, guess what? Then if you only have 3 borrowers that are reaching out to you and you have to close all those deals, chances are your deals aren't going to be strong as the next person who has 30 or 300 borrowers that are contacting them. Then they can cherry pick the best of 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 the deal. And I know that a lot of lenders have got squeezed over the last 2 months, things have changed. And that shouldn't be like that. Most importantly, because there's less liquidity on the streets right now. And a lot of capital has dried up. So if you've been out there making a name for yourself and being present and taking care of your clients and your borrowers, they're going to come back to you and they're going to continue to reach out. And if you're just new and you're just getting started, well, never better time than right now to be very, very proactive and say, hey, I've got capital available, or I have a hard money lending company, and go out there and hit the streets. And listen, it depending on your age, it's not the most fun thing to do to go to a meetup group at 7:00 on a Thursday night to raise your hand from the back of the room and say, hey, I got capital. Who wants it? And hand your business card, unless you have that personality type and you love doing that type of stuff. But that's not that sexy for everybody. And that's not to say that has to be done forever. But like, that stuff works. And it might be boring for some people. But point being is, like, we could replace the word with boring to basic if you wanted to, if you don't like that word boring, but like
block and tackle, you could call it many different things.
Stick to what it is and rinse and repeat, right? If you have a successful deal that worked in the past, figure out all the common denominators that made it successful and repeat it and figure out what it took to do that. Like, that's been what we've been doing for years. And we've got very, 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 very good at it. And sometimes take it for granted because sometimes, someone reaches out in the mastermind group and says, hey, how would you structure this deal? Do it like that. Like, this is an easy way to do it, right? And after you have reps and after you have experience, I mean, one of the big things we always recommend is if you're starting out or you don't have a lot of money deployed, is you personally talking to every borrower, because you need to know what their questions are, what, you need to have a gut feel if they're worth working with themselves. So, I mean, there's endless things. Point being is, do the boring work.
Do the boring work. We appreciate checking out
it's not,
it pays off.
The boring work is not $15 an hour work. It's $1,000 an hour work, right? That's what it equals.
Oh yeah. Just has to be consistent. So yeah, guys, thanks for checking out the Private Lenders Podcast. We appreciate it. Until next time, go take a look at hardmoneymastermind.com, create a free account, chat with us and the rest of the community, and we'll see you on the podcast next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you'd enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1